Thank you very much for that kind and warm introduction. And I'd like to greet one and all who are here today. And thank you so much, NGO CSW New York, for bringing us together in this manner and from the warmth that one feels in the room. Those who have jet lag, we'll try our best to make sure that you reset your body clock as quickly as possible. I'm also honored to be here today also because this is a great time for the women's movement. We have come a long way with the struggle for women's equality and women's empowerment. So gender equality and women's empowerment. It's been centuries of the struggle. It's been 15 years, soon to be 15 years of MDGs, soon to be 20 years of Beijing. That's a lot of work that we've done together. We, however, must pat ourselves at the back that there has been progress, but also pause to consider what is still to be done. I am also happy that I am here with dedicated women and men a day before the annual commission of the Status of Women event begins. I very much look forward to the next 2 weeks, which I know will be productive and fruitful in all the engagements that we'll have with you. I'd like to give a special thanks to the chair of the NGO Committee of the Status of Women for New York, Mrs. Sun Young Yoon, for everything that you do. Not just today, just everything that you do. At last year's CSW, we saw governments reach a historic consensus on the agreed conclusions on action to be taken to end violence against women. An advertising campaign supporting UN women and exposing online sexism went viral, igniting a global debate and grabbing the attention of the global media. Another public service announcement, this one in Egypt, also went viral. The peace challenge stereotyped and focused on the reality of the daily harassment Egyptian women and girls face, while urging the men and boys of the country to step up and help to address the issue, which is reaching crisis proportion. And in June, UN Women released a position paper to inform and influence the post-2015 agenda discussion. It outlines transformative agenda for women and girls in the post-2015 era. The paper makes a strong case for a standalone goal on gender equality, which focuses on freedom from violence, equal access to opportunities and resources, and women's voices and leadership. The paper also emphasizes the critical importance of mainstreaming gender equality concerns across all parts of the post-2015 development agenda. Just to highlight some of the concerns and the observations that we have made in the MDGs, but also one needs to reflect this as some of the issues that will probably also arise in our evaluation of Beijing plus 20, because these 15 and 20 years overlap. We know that from the evaluation of the performance of the MDGs that extreme hunger has been halved before time, but we also know that there's many more people, women and children in particular, who live with extreme hunger. We also know that the fact that women continue to do unpaid care work, continue to do work that is lowest paid, contributes to the hunger and poverty that women continue to experience. We know that more girls are at school, especially at primary level, but not enough girls are going through to secondary education. The ones that go through get to be admitted and enrolled at primary school level drop out in rather alarming numbers. And of course, that we are still challenged by the issue of quality of education. This must not, however, take away from the hard work that was done by the countries who started at a very low base with very limited resources to ramp up enrollment and access to education in every corner of the world. We also know that our own goal 3 on equality made some progress, not enough. Yes, 1 out of 5 women are now in parliament, but this is not something to console out, given that we are more than 51% on the globe. We also know that a lot of women have participated, not just in government, but also in other spheres of life. But we also know that, especially in the economy, the participation and the leadership of women is still very disappointing. Of course, infant mortality is decreasing, not enough. It is anticipated that by 2015, we would have reached 2/3 of infants that are saved from infant mortality. We know that the risk of climate change affecting women disproportionately still stares us in the eye, but we also know that out of Rio Plus 20, some progress was made, and the role that women play, not least in my case, my own ASG plays a very crucial role in ensuring that women's role in the whole debate of sustainable development and climate change is critical. We also know that HIV and AIDS has seen a somewhat downward trend in some parts of the world, but we also know that women, young women especially, are still at high risk, and we know that sexual violence, inability to negotiate responsible sexual relations keep women exposed and in danger. Access to resources that finance and support development continues to challenge us. Talking as UN women, I know that very well. But the women in general, in every aspect of the women's work, face a challenge of limited resources. So overall, we have a lot of work to do. We have enough data to know what needs to be done. Governments have got the data. And in fact, what we've always known as women intuitively about the important role of women in bringing about changes has now been confirmed by the overwhelming data that exists and evidence about the role that women can play in sustainably reducing poverty, in addressing inequality, and of course, the crucial role that women can play in peace and security. Recently, working with women, especially women in South Sudan and in Syria, who are also displaced and are refugees in Jordan and in other parts of the world, it has been clear that no matter where women are, they remain seized with an agenda for peace. They stand up and call for peace. Those that are inside the country in the war zone, they stand up and call for peace. They continue to work for socio-economic well-being of those that are affected in their communities, the injured, the children, and old people. They are able to cross the divide and speak to everybody who's affected in the conflict with one focus only: to bring peace into their land. They therefore can never be a possibility for the world in areas of conflict to truly address the issue of peace if we do not involve women significantly. Last year, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 2122, requiring strengthening measures for women's full participation at all stages of conflict prevention, resolution, and recovery. This is because of the realization of the role that women play in bringing about stability, peace, and security. In a landmark step, the country of Colombia announced the 2 women would join the government's team of 5 negotiators in the latest round of peace talks. In Rwanda, women won an unprecedented a cool 63.8% of Rwanda's parliamentary seats, securing its place as the world's only majority female parliament. I mean, how cool is that? In Senegal, one of our women leaders, activists, feminists, and a former member of the UN Women team, Amanita Toure, was appointed a prime minister. And now I'm saving the best for the last. As you know, my predecessor in this position, Madame Michelle Bachelet, was recently elected as president of Chile. Well, not only that, she previously served, and they wanted her back again. This is a demonstration and a testimony of the kind of influence and the impact that women have. How many men can say they've been recalled back into office? In the last 13 years of MDGs, MDGs have played an important role in increasing attention to women's empowerment and to gender equality as a global priority. For example, in terms of Millennium Development Goal 3, designed to promote gender equality and empower women, the gender gap in primary school enrollment in developing countries has fallen in the last decade. Again, just highlighting the importance of data, because then we know where to shine the light going forward. Women's presence in parliament, as you know, has grown, not as impressive as we need it to be, but we have gained a lot of insight into what pushes the role of women. There was a time when we used to have arguments about quotas, whether they work or they don't work. They work. But we must not think that just because we have deployed women in leadership positions, our job is done. Women need to be accompanied, need to be supported, and our selection of women also needs to be informed by the capacity of those women to make changes and their commitment to the cause of women. There have always been gain in women's access to decent work, and women and girls' access to safe, reliable, and hygienic sanitation facilities, but definitely not enough. But even in the light of these gains that are mixed and unequal, we need to think about how, in the post-2015 agenda, we combine the successes that we know about, the challenges that we have identified, and the opportunities that we see. Because right now, we are at a crossroads. There is a risk that we could just become stagnant and twig and be involved in endless negotiations that shift this weight to that place and to that place. And in the end, a woman who is sitting somewhere at the back of a mountain in one of our countries where gender equality is only a dream would not even know that a conference like this took place. When we engage on this issue, it's going to be important that we continuously think about, so what? So what? What does this change? Whose life is going to be impacted? And I know that as civil society, a lot is not in your hands. But we are citizens of countries. We need to do what we can to influence as well as to challenge our delegations and help and support them to make the right decisions. We need to make sure that the fact that we've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity as this generation, as this intergenerational audience, to end the MDGs, to prepare for post-2015, to evaluate and to glaze at what 20 years of Beijing has given us. Emerging on the other side, we've got to be able to arrive on the other side with a bolder agenda that can move us forward. Because if the agenda is not bold enough, truly we would be stagnating. After hundreds of years of struggle, after intense focus that Beijing provided us, an intense focus that MDGs has given us, Icona, there's got to be something we could do differently and better, and I know that we are very motivated as well. Am I right or am I right? We have, therefore, as you know, as many of you I know, have looked at our proposals for post-2015. The one goal that we propose for the post-2015 agenda, in which we will and must address the issue of the dehumanizing violence against women that is prevalent in all our countries, rich and poor, north, east, south, north. We have to make sure that the issue of children, that we as society allow to have sexual relationships with adults in the so-called child marriages. Because a child cannot marry, a child cannot be a bride. So this practice is one of the worst forms of violence against girls. This is an area in which I hope in this century, and I have to keep on emphasizing, in the early part of the century, this practice is something that we need to unite and end. There are more and more governments, thankfully, who are as concerned as we are. When we were in Addis for the AU a few weeks ago, I was very encouraged by the call for the commissioner responsible for this issue, who highlights that the fact that if the AU does not do anything else, this is one of the most important things that the AU wants and is determined to address. So I know that that is not just in relation to Africa. Those voices probably exist in all parts of the world where this practice is still continues. In addition to addressing the one goal, we are also talking, in addressing the violence against women, in the one goal, we're also talking about the important matters of addressing the root causes of the sustained inequality, removing the structural barriers, addressing patriarchy at its root causes, and talking about that, and finding ways in which we could actually, in programmatic, in legislative terms, and in advocacy, address that effectively. Because we know that through development and other means where we've tried to address women's issues, the fact that we haven't always been maybe as focused on the systemic changes, we find ourselves coming back to the same place. We put so much energy, we work so hard, and we look back and say, actually, what has changed? So we need, therefore, to address the root causes. We need to bring in the rights focus into the equation of the things that we're doing with reproductive health and sexual rights as key aspects of this new narrative, or rather, the narrative that we are strengthening. We need to address the issue of access to opportunities and access to resources that either drive or stop the emancipation as well as the equality of women. Land is one of those. Access to finance is one of those. And of course, where we have passed legislation, implementation is also very critical. Because in many of our countries, more than 132 countries have got constitutions that enshrine equality between men and women. But there's not even a single country in this world that has attained true equality. The third aspect that we are arguing for in the gender goal is the whole area of leadership, of women's influence, of women's participation. There is a danger that we're beginning to accept mediocrity as the ultimate. We work on targets, and we need to be fair, not be too hard on ourselves, and recognize the progress that we make from year after year, decade after decade. But we must never reach a point where we are comfortable when we say 1 out of 5 women are in parliament. We need to be working for much more. I know that in many situations we use 30% as a rallying number for us to reach a critical mass. I can't call 30%, what do you call, tipping level. Does it tip? I don't think so. Tipping point. We need to work for more. Otherwise, there's a risk that we'll just relax and we'll never be able to achieve our true potential. So in addressing in this goal, the issue of participation, the issue of influence, the issue of representation, it is because we're building to this tipping point, where in any case, it would have to be normal that women are there, represented, and also proportional to the population that they represent. We need to also focus on targets and indicators which we must embed across all other goals. And I choose the word embed, so that it must be in the DNA of each goal. Because if we don't do that, we will never be able to have thoroughgoing transformation. Thoroughgoing transformation does not happen if you do something, as we can say in South Africa, a beachy on the side. It has to be an integral part of everything that would happen in those goals. We are therefore calling for all of you who may also be working on women in other sectors to pay attention with us in those details in order to make sure that each and every goal is a factor in transforming the space for women. And of course, we have not reached the end of the MDGs. We still have some time, and therefore we also talk about the acceleration of progress of the MDGs. You know, Secretary General has been calling on all of us to pay attention to this last mile that is leading us to the end of the MDG, and so much can be achieved towards the end. And in order for us to take advantage of this intense space of time, he has called for us to focus on scaling up those initiatives that we know have got an impact and will be able to be transferred to different contexts and to be embraced by different countries. He has asked us to focus on countries that are fragile and very poor, whose situation is much more complex. He has also asked us to pay attention to the issue of resources and the allocation of resources in such a way that we are able to leverage the opportunities that is there, because in some cases, we may need very little in order to leverage very big money. However, having said that, the financing gap that exists for women is a story of its own that needs to be given its own attention. The fourth area, what is the fourth area, John? of the Secretary General? I've talked about accountability. Yes. We have to be, that one is a given. So we have also to focus on being accountable, but he premises this accountability also by talking about re-energizing the constituencies that must address and participate in this acceleration. And for me, in this context of civil society, energizing also means advocacy, because it is about ensuring that those that are responsible for implementation are taking the best possible steps to utilize the resources at their disposal. We are also calling, as UN Women, for the expansion of the population that is focused on the work that we do for women. It has been women alone. Can I have water? It has been women who have been working boldly and courageously in addressing gender equality. We have always said that this is a societal issue, thanks, and women should not do this alone. Cheers. We need to make sure that we implement this in such a way that we create another mass movement of activists for gender equality and for women's empowerment. That has to take roots amongst young people. And I want to salute those of you in your delegations who have brought in young people to participate in this CSW. Hola, young women, hola. Hola, young women, hola. I can't hear you. Are there young women here? Okay. It's a new and an important constituency that we need in order to give the baton. It is suicidal for us not to invest in the mobilization, in the empowerment of young women, because in any case, they are the leaders of today. We have also, in UN Women, gone out of our way to reach out to men. For men to take their responsibility to address this issue, which they are part of the problem, they are also part of the solution. Hola, men, hola. In that regard, we also congratulate and salute those men who have come out and are doing the right thing. The voices are not loud enough. The voices are not loud enough. The numbers are not big enough. We need men in the streets. We need women in their synagogues. We need men in their workplaces. We need men in their cities to be out there championing the cause for women visibly and loudly. We are calling the campaign a he for she. We have a website for it. Please invite men in your lives and those that you don't like to do something about this, to participate and to play their part. We believe that this must be an issue in which not just the other half that is subjected to oppression has got a responsibility, but the other half, which makes up the half of humanity, also has got a role to play, and the role is significant. Last month, we had our Global Civil Society Advisory Group meeting here, and I'd like to tell you that that advisory group is one of the civil society advisory groups that we now have established. Some of them exist at a regional level as well as at national level. We see this as a very important contribution to ensure that UN Women continues to be faithful and loyal to its founding constituency, the civil society. We are highly appreciative of the role that many of you play in supporting our country office, play in supporting our regional team, and play in supporting us here at headquarters. This Global Civil Society Advisory Group issued a call to action to all citizens, to other members of civil society, to young women and men, to community leaders, to policymakers and the media to come together in a concerted action to achieve gender equality, women's rights, and women's empowerment in our lifetime. In closing, I'd like to emphasize the fact that this is a moral issue. The oppression of women and the continued hit and miss approach, where we are pushing and pulling so hard, but somehow we never seem to hit the biggest target of all, is something that in a strategic manner we have to address so that we can sharpen our collective energy to make sure that we can get the push that we now need. There must also be a way in which we remain accountable to each other. We must embrace the call for data revolution so that we are able to provide the evidence that is out there that explains what we are trying to do and that underpins many of the actions that we take. On my part, I'm looking forward to the next 2 weeks to be with you, to your contribution, to the many side events that we are going to be meeting in, to your council, to your delegations, as well as to your advocacy wherever and whenever it is needed. I thank you so much for taking the time to be here this morning.